So one key thing about documentation is that it's not just telling the story of what happened, but it's also analyzing what happened and trying to make sense of it to both understand the child or group of children that you're working with, understand just children in general, how they learn, what misconceptions they may have, what they're struggling with, and that sort of thing. So I wanted to share one piece of documentation that I created. I worked with a little boy in a Head Start classroom who was really interested in box making and how to make a box. And so I did some documentation on the very first day of his box making procedure. And so let's take a look at this. What you'll see is that first I used a series of photographs to document the sequence that he went through. And so here I've got 6 photographs that shows the whole sequence of that first day. This actually took place over about 20 or 30 minutes as he worked on it. And so I had to kind of narrow it down to what was the most important. And on the first page, I just explain what David did. So what it was is that at group time, they had this special box, a treasury box, that they had to guess what was inside the box and get hints. And so that seemed to really intrigue him, and he wanted to make his own box. So after group, he showed this interest in making his own box, and the teachers were supporting him. And so at first he wanted the teachers to just do it for him, but it took some encouragement, but he began to make his own. And in the ways we encouraged him was by asking questions, about talking about boxes, looking at the box that we used at group time so that he could kind of get an idea. Children will often ask you to do things for them, and it's okay to support them, like holding the paper so they can glue it, or asking questions, but you don't really want to do it for them or give them too many answers, even though you might know the answers because you're an adult. Because this method of inquiry is very important for children to learn that they can do it, that they can find ways to answer the questions that they have. This is really an important disposition for young children and all children to have, because we live in a society that's changing really quickly. So the important thing is not having all the answers, but knowing how to get the answers and how to discover answers for yourself. So David started by gluing 3 pieces of paper together, and he rolled them into a cylinder. Now you and I know a box is usually square, but for him the cylinder at least demonstrated an enclosure. So then he was trying to figure out, and that's what we see in the bottom 3 pictures. He knew that boxes had a tops and a bottom, so he was trying to figure out how to do those top and bottom. And so first he put a piece of paper on the top, and then he trimmed it to fit, but it didn't really work that well to his satisfaction. So then he decided to use a heavier piece of paper. And here's where, having lots of materials, open-ended materials in your classroom is beneficial because, hey, the paper was right there. We could just talk about it and he could choose another one. We didn't have to go to the cupboard to get it or anything, even though we could. Or we didn't have to say, well, tomorrow I'll get the paper out. It was there, ready for him to use. So the second time he decided to use construction paper, and he folded over one edge to make it secure. Instead of cutting it to fit, this time he folded over one edge and he put the box on top of it. But in the end, he wasn't really happy with that box either. So he took the construction paper off, and at the end of that day, he just had that circular enclosure. And it was so interesting because he said, I'm making a circle box, but the tops keep coming off and off. So he was aware that his box was circular, whereas other boxes are square. And he was also communicating here that the tops aren't working for him. They keep coming off and tops are supposed to stay on. But having that quote from him was really, really insightful and enlightening to us as teachers. So this is where the first day ended. This is the only day I created this documentation for, although many more things happened throughout his exploration of boxes. But I wanted to give you a simple example of this. So then what I did next is, and on the next page, is to really talk about what I noticed about David and the kind of what some of the ideas he have, what are some of his strategies for implementing those ideas, and what are some of those dispositions and things about learning that he is experiencing and demonstrating during this time. So I wrote, David seems to know a great deal about boxes. He knows that the sides of a box creates a three-dimensional shape, and so he wrapped the paper all the way around and connected end to end because he knows that that's how you can make a three-dimensional shape. He also understands that boxes are enclosed on the ends, and he tried several strategies to put a lid on his box, but none were satisfactory. Now, as a teacher, I could focus on what David doesn't know, because there's a lot of things he hasn't yet figured out. But why would I do that? He has so many strengths. He's curious, he's persistent. He's trying to problem solve this. These are all fantastic things. And a 3 or 4-year-old doesn't know a whole lot about the world yet. And so they are exploring and figuring this out. So in the next paragraph, I really talk about some of those approaches to learning. So he showed his ability to problem solve in his attempt to make a box. He was persistent in his effort to make a lid for the box. He pressed the paper down with his hands, trying to push it down to make it fit and stay on. He trimmed it. He tried folding one end. He tried gluing both lids down. None of those methods worked, but he was still patient and excited about his box making. And he left that circle box to come back to for the next day. So we encouraged him to leave it. We saved it for him so that the next day we could talk to him more about that circle box. And then for the third slide here, I really talk about using that analysis of what, at first I had the what happened, then I had the second slide is the analysis of what happened. And then in this third slide, what I'm really doing is reflecting on, well, what could we do next for him? What kind of curriculum? What could we set up? And so my thought was, what if he had real boxes to look at and discover how it was made? Would that help him understand box construction? And so making a lid also seemed to be very important for him. And also that his box should be in enclosure. So bringing in a variety of boxes and containers to explore may give him some ideas about how to make a lid for his own box. So this is me planning for the next day, which you can see in this photograph. I did bring in boxes and I left them together and we deconstructed them together. So here you can see him taking apart a box. And what I wanted to, my goal was to see if he would notice how you could take a box all together and it's really a flat piece of paper that's been folded. So that's what we were kind of looking on. We didn't talk to him about that. We just wanted to see if he would notice it, which eventually down the road he did. So this is just a little example of a piece of documentation. I've got photographs that follow the series of what happened and a description of it. I reflect on and I analyze, what's going on here. What does he know? What does he has misconceptions about? What are some of the strengths? What are the skills he's using? And then really thinking about planning for the next day as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit more better understanding of how you can use documentation. It's not just photographs, videos, and all of that, but it's also us as teachers really analyzing that, breaking it down, figuring out what the child knows, what they don't know, and how we can then help develop curriculum around that. And if I continued with this during the whole box construction, You would also, in my documentation, see the growth of understanding of this child. And that's the other piece, which I don't really have here in this presentation, but showing the growth over time of a child's understanding of a concept or an idea or a topic that they're studying. So I would want to actually, if I was going to make a documentation panel, I would want to show not only this first day, but the second day, the third day, and all of the days to show the growth of his understanding and how he got there, what kind of experiences he had, how his understanding developed, and so on. So showing that growth over time is really important. So I hope this helps, and please email me if you have any questions about this.